Welcome to the Garden of Edun. Dami be asking the questions for the answers that you want to hear. All you gotta do is sit back, grab a chair, or listen up while you clean and cook. Take a leaf from the creative's book. These gems open your mind and your heart. Okay, the show's gonna start. Cheese! Welcome back to the Garden of Edun podcast, everyone. I'm your host, Dami Edun, and this is where ideas grow. Today, we've got a very special guest coming on the podcast today. Man like Stephen. Stephen, how you doing today, bro?
Yo, what's going on, Dams? You good?
Yeah, man, I'm blessed, man. I'm alive, so can't really complain. How's things over your side?
Yeah, I'm good. Same as you. It's a new year, so we're going into it with like new challenges, new goals, everything, all of that. I don't even necessarily do the whole new year, new start thing, but you do get that bit of refresh in the new year. So yeah, just like started with a new job and stuff as well. So I'm just using it as a chance to build and grow in another direction. So yeah, man.
Yeah, man. I think it's definitely a good time as well because obviously, like, it seems, and fingers crossed, nothing comes to change the situation, but it seems
Yeah,
as though we're coming out of the tail end of the pandemic
the
and
pandemic,
Corona being a thing, and
honestly.
we're entering like the real new normal
Yeah,
is happening now. So yeah, I hear you, man, and I think I'm on a similar vein. So just to give you an intro, um just to give the audience an intro to you, Stephen. You're an award-winning podcast host. So first,
I forget that sometimes.
I've got
Honestly,
a clap for that. I got a clap for that. I'm trying
no,
to
big
get
up,
there
big up, big
myself.
up.
So it's sick to see, and that's on the platform Beyond the Hashtag,
Yeah,
which if I'm right is tackling discrimination within the game of football,
yeah.
through conversation and action. So I don't know if you want to share a little bit more about um just like a summary of what you're doing, and then we'll get into some of the questions that I have for you, bro.
Yeah. No, absolutely. You summarized it pretty well. Yeah, it's a platform that I've built in the last couple of weeks. Well, just over a year now, year and a half. Started it midway through 2020, so in sort of the height of the pandemic. Yeah, just looking to tackle the various different issues of discrimination within British football specifically. I'm starting at the moment because I wanted to focus on that niche area because we live in Britain and loads of us know and study British football, that kind of thing. So I wanted to hopefully tackle it in British football, but then also issues of discrimination aren't just a football issue, as we know, it's a societal issue. So I'm hoping that if football can be, let's say, a flag bearer in tackling loads of different issues, then hopefully it can spread to other industries and hopefully society in general. So yeah, and it's just a case of talking to different people within the game to understand what some of the problems are, b what
Mm.
solutions are being done at the moment to tackle some of the problems, and then see what people's ideas and thoughts are to actually take and progress the solutions to the next level. Because obviously, if the problem's still there, it means whatever solutions are there aren't working. So yeah, it's just a combination of all those kind of things. But mainly, I've grown to sort of be in the last year and a half the sort of hub of the discrimination sort of discussion and conversation, because people sort of see things pop up and stuff and they reference Beyond the Hashtag, or they come to me and then they're
Come
using
on.
me as a little sort of touch point to the discussion, which is fine, and which I'm happy to do, and happy to be that place where people can let their ideas flourish and have that conversation, because it wasn't there before. So I feel like I've done well to identify and progress that gap in the market.
Yeah, no, definitely, man. It's interesting because for me, like my own personal journey with football, like as I guess a lot of young people or young men aspire to be, you look at professional footballers as superheroes, and
Yeah.
you want to emulate them and you want to become them. And I think maybe fortunately or like ignorantly, when I was growing up, I actually played for a lot of teams, like up until the age of 14, 15. I played
Yeah.
for a lot of teams that were coached, managed by black managers and
Okay.
black
Yeah.
coaches. So I didn't really experience much like discrimination within football as a player
Even
until
from
my team,
opponents.
even really from opponents, man.
Yeah.
Because we mostly played in the East London area, so we were
Yeah.
generally playing with teams that were multicultural, and it just wasn't
Okay. Yeah.
it wasn't a visceral thing
Yeah.
until I started playing for a team out in Essex called Whittam Town Football Club when I
Yeah.
was about 14, 15. And that was when I first got some direct experience. For example, I had a coach once say, "Oh yeah, this other team, they're really good. They had another coloured player, and like they were
There you go.
fast and strong, and all
Yeah.
the
Pace and
stereotypes."
power, yeah.
And because I was the only black player in the team and I was really young, I didn't really know how to deal with that.
To respond,
I-
yeah.
yeah, and you know, I think when you do sometimes bring these topics up, it's quite easy to get gaslit and to get shoved down. So for you, Stephen, like what's been the inspiration for you as an individual? Because obviously it's good to have these talk about these topics in general, but there must be an inspiration to talk about race within football, and you to almost be the torchbearer. So what made you decide, you know what, I'm going to do this, I'm gonna create this platform, I'm gonna be the guy holding the space for this? Because that's quite a big decision to make from the
Yeah.
outside looking in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And to be fair, it started in a place that we both are quite familiar with, which was Uni of Knots. So that's where this idea, I guess, was kind of like birthed and was able, the seed was planted, I guess, and it started to grow. So it was my dissertation, because I did a politics and economics degree. So my dissertation in politics was basically, write about something that you're passionate about, but also, that obviously relates to your degree. So I thought, okay, love football, so how do I incorporate it within politics? And then I won't go into too much detail, but basically the title of the dissertation was like, how can we use politics to kick discrimination, or I think it was racism specifically, out of British football? Because I basically thought, we have this massive issue. Who is responsible for changing anything within this country? It's politicians, right? Like they make all the decisions, the laws, etc. So, why are they not doing enough to tackle this issue of discrimination within football? So I did research into the history, the 20, 30 years of Kick It Out and all those kind of things, and got some findings, like, and just got more of a solid idea rather than just from a spectator consumer point of view. I actually got to know what was actually going on inside the game. So yeah, that dissertation piece, it done me really well, and it opened my eyes to a lot of things. Obviously, coupled with the fact that he actually did quite well in terms of, like, from an educational piece, like, I got a good mark for it. So, my professors and stuff, like, really sort of bigged up what I was doing. And then, so I was like, cool, like, this made me feel good. This looks like something that has a good impact. But how do I take it to the next level? And people suggested, writing blogs and that kind of thing. And I was like, I kind of sat on it for a little bit, but I was like, I've just done. The dissertation itself was 15,000 words. I just done a whole politics degree, economics degree. Like, I just done bare writing in my life. I was like, do I want to spend the next however many years, whatever, just spending every week writing? Like, I just done with it. So, and then I've always been into podcasts literally since day dot. Like, we're talking, like, even before uni, I was pretty much listening to podcasts. So I knew that podcast was sort of a mini passion of mine. But I was thinking, I'd love to start a podcast, but I didn't really know how to, I guess, go about it. And then, long story short, I found little routes and little ideas, probably similar to how you started this podcast as well. And then, just managed to find the distributors to put it on the different networks. And literally, I just started small. Like, literally, my first episode, I was recording into my phone, didn't have a mic, didn't have anything. Literally, like,
oh wow, you used your phone first episode.
Literally, first episode, I didn't have nothing. Literally, I was like, literally just recording into my phone, put it out there, and then luckily, thank God, like, one of my boys, he, like, does production and sound, that kind of thing. So he picked up. He was like, your content's really good, but sound this and that. So he's literally like, come to my yard, use my mic, etc. I'll help you edit it, that kind of stuff. And then he's now my right hand man with the podcast now. Like, he's called PBO House because he does production, branding and all those kind of things. Like, he's literally my right hand man for the podcast and helps me produce all that kind of stuff. So then the idea just kind of grew, and more people started to get engaged with it, and we're growing from there, really.
Hey there, Garden of Edun podcast listeners. Sorry to interrupt this episode. I just wanted to say thank you for watching and listening. If you get value from this podcast, from the guests sharing their perspectives on their journeys, I would appreciate if you could share this with maybe one or two people that will get something out of it. If you like the podcast, please subscribe or follow it on whichever audio platform you're listening to it on. We've got more exciting content coming up with athletes, musicians, comedians, journalists, sharing their journeys towards mastery. And now back to the show. Yeah, I mean, your boy's gonna love that you plugged him on the
Yeah,
pod. So
yeah.
shout out to
Yeah,
my
PB
man
your
for
house. Yeah,
facilitating
yeah.
you. Yeah,
100%, man.
it's sick as well that you started with your phone because like I guess I know for a lot of people when they start something new creatively they can think, oh, man doesn't have the XLR mic
Yeah.
or man doesn't have the DSLR camera, so I can't
None of
really
that,
start,
man.
man. I need to get that first. But it's sick you started with a phone and had the confidence to do that. So
Bro, literally,
that's
like if you wait for all this kind of things before you start stuff, you'll never start. Like that's my biggest advice to people. Like if you're starting anything, like just start with whatever you have, and then that's when you get the feedback and the all that kind of thing from people, and then you can be like, okay, cool. Maybe now I know that I need a mic, so let me like save up for a little bit, look at what mics are in the market, research it, get a mic, and then all of a sudden people will see the growth of whatever you're building, rather than if you have all the gear and pretty much no idea if you're starting from scratch because you haven't really
yeah.
done, yeah, you haven't really jumped into it to kind of experience and stuff. So you have all the gear, but then people like, then you'll start wondering to yourself, oh, if let's say I want to start a YouTube channel and I've got, all the best camera, the best mic, whatever, put out the first video and you're getting like 10 views. You're like, right, like, but man has all this equipment, but why am I not getting the views and stuff, whatever? And then you start to realize like how you can build and grow and that kind of stuff. So if you just start small and you build, then, the growth will happen naturally.
Yeah, defo, man. I'm sure when that when that 10 views comes in, you're like, right, I spent 1.5 bags on all this stuff and I only got 10 views. I'm vexed.
In fact, not even one view
But
per pound that you spent. Like,
oh no,
bro.
oh no, yeah. No, even financially it's a good decision, and yeah. No, it's good to see that things have started to elevate because I've noticed that with watching your content, especially the most recent episode that I've watched, which we'll definitely get into. But
Yeah,
first place I want to go actually is the name beyond the hashtag because
yeah.
I would imagine, and maybe I could be wrong. Maybe my research was a little bit off, and apologies if it was. But I would imagine that's alluding to the Black Lives Matter movement that reached its peak
Mhm.
in the summer of 2020. Am I right in that thinking?
Um, ish to an extent. I guess it was born in the same time as that, but I think the idea mainly came from even historically since social media has come about, basically, and not even just to do with discrimination in football, but to do with anything. And I think one of the things I referenced was, when the like the Paris, the Notre Dame, I think got burnt down, like. I think,
Oh yeah.
or something happened with the Notre Dame, but there's basically so many different events. I think there's been a couple of bombings and stuff where basically something happens in the news, people make a hashtag about it for like a day or two, and then they forget about it. Like, and that was more prevalent with stuff like racism. It would be like, this place is racially abused. Oh, hashtag kick it out. Hashtag no room for racism, whatever it is. And then a week later, no one's talking about it. Like, no, people don't care, basically. So yeah, the idea of beyond the hashtag is literally going beyond the hashtag, but the deeper meanings are to kind of go beyond just thinking about stuff for, one day, 1 week, whatever. It's, what conversations are you having, a month later, 2 months later, a year later. And that's where this whole solutions idea of my podcast comes around, because I don't think I mentioned it, but basically the premise of my podcast is to focus on those solutions so we can recognize what's gone on in the past, etc. But the main point, and every episode I have focuses on at least one solution to whatever problem we're kind of talking about. So that lends itself to, being, I guess, going beyond the hashtag, because you're not just, identifying the problem and talking about it in the present day, but you're looking towards the future to kind of understand where you're going to go to solve the problem kind of thing. So yeah, it's all just about continuing the discussion more than just the present day. So, and that's where I hope to hold organizations and people in the game to account of kind of what they're planning to do about solving discrimination. If you literally find that solution and say to them, okay, fine, you said this on February 2022. We're now in November 2022. What have you done? Like, it's something as simple as that.
Oh God, bro, that is one of my pet peeves around the conversation because like people, like you said, we'll talk around about an issue and it almost seems like we're cycling around the same conversations again and again,
Exactly.
especially when it comes to racism in this country in general.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, okay, cool, we're all aware that this is going on, that this is embedded.
Mm.
How are we gonna solve it? What solutions and actions are we gonna put in place to actually
Yeah.
help the wider, the wider, I guess, society in tackling this.
Yeah.
And out of curiosity, actually, have you through the work that you've done through your podcast and conversations that you have you noticed any changes, or have you noticed any people taking actions from like within the game of football through your platform, like within the institution? Have you noticed any people look at what you're doing and go, okay,
Yeah.
cool, we might actually address things and start putting measures in place? What have you seen so far?
Not in terms of action, more in terms of I guess people taking note that the conversation is happening and people being more willing to discuss things and kind of put what they're doing out into the public space. And kind of maybe like using my platform as a medium, but not in terms of like actual action, because I guess it's very difficult to penetrate into the kind of organizations that actually need to make change and make action. So like I speak quite a lot to Troy Townsend, who is head of player engagement at Kick It Out. For those who don't know, he's Andros Townsend's dad, but he's worked in Kick It Out
Right.
for quite a number of years. But he's been someone who's like worked in Kick It Out for, I want to say, like over 10, 15 years. A black guy who's
Wow.
like really, he has the heart to like really push and deal with this like kind of racism struggle. And someone like him, and he talks to football clubs, organizations, owners of football clubs on a very regular basis. And someone like him struggles to even, make a breakthrough into some of these discussions. Like even as recently as all this stuff coming out with Zouma and all those kind of things, like he's having relevant discussions with people. Yeah, it's a touchy subject, but he's having relevant discussions.
We'll get
with
into
people.
it though. We'll get into it.
He's having relevant discussions with people, but like he's openly admitted to me, people will not do anything until they care to do something about it. And people only really care when their pockets start getting hit with money. So all we can do is keep raising things and raising the discussion and publicising it as much as we can. But the people who actually hold the cards to do stuff about it will not do anything until it hits their pockets, basically. That's the sad bottom line.
Yeah, man, it's a sad part of, I guess, capitalism in general. Like, if it's not hitting people's pockets, they generally don't tend to care. And racism in itself is a business in some degree. Like when you look at like bleaching products and the way your beauty standards are advertised in the Western world and then pushed internationally, like it's a very deep problem. So it that makes money as well. So it's definitely it's definitely a tough one.
One thing I will say though, on a local level, which I've been more proud of and surprised about, has been people in and around me and anyone who's like engaged in the podcast has, as I mentioned at the start of the podcast, like kind of used me as a sort of mouthpiece and as a flag bearer to talk about these kind of issues, and they kind of feel comfortable that okay, if I spot this, either I put it to Stephen and ask Stephen, I don't think this is right, what do you think about it, blah blah blah, or they know it's wrong and they say, Stephen, have you seen this, blah blah blah, maybe put it on your page so you can alert other people. So I've seen the difference even in my white friends or black friends or different multicultural friends have come to me with these kind of things and sparked discussions that they wouldn't have done otherwise if maybe I hadn't started the platform that I had. So on a local level, I can definitely see the impact in even just the people around me and the people who've engaged in the podcast on that level. So yeah, I guess even if you can change one person, it's doing something, right?
Yeah, definitely. And this is how it starts, isn't it? Really, this is the seed for change. And I think as we move forward as a society with the way people are consuming information now, more through social channels, no one's really watching TV or listening to radio as much as they're consuming YouTube and podcasts on Spotify or Apple or wherever they're listening to. And the more that happens and the more people are listening on those channels, then the more potential there is for more people to listen to you and then change to come and so on and so forth, right? So it's good to hear.
No, facts.
Yeah. So obviously, because I talk to quite a lot of people who are just creators in general. So just people who are creating content or people who are putting out art into the world, so like musicians, etc. And obviously there is generally a level of self-doubt and nerves that people have to contend with when putting their babies out into the world for people to judge, right? And for you especially, you're creating content around topics which I would class as very, close to the heart and uncomfortable. They're gonna and can be really quite emotional as well, and can then make it harder to share. So how do you, Stephen, generally manage like the stress and the emotionally draining nature of that conversation? Because it, from my perspective, I would imagine that does have an effect, but
Yeah.
it would be good to hear your perspective on it.
Yeah, bro. It can be a lot sometimes. Like I go through like peaks and troughs of how easy it is to consume information, and I guess that's why I guess the approach I've taken with the podcast is I've like tried my best to not let it affect my sort of daily life or like sort of my kind of daily routine, that kind of thing. Like, and I've made sure to always try and take regular breaks with it. So, for example, when I first started the podcast, I said I'm only going to release it every fortnight, so an episode every fortnight, and I kind of broke it up like that. So it gave me like a week to do the podcast, maybe do the promo and stuff, and essentially have a week off and then start again, kind of thing. So I was doing it in those kind of cycles, and I've always literally taken breaks, even if like let's say I release 10 episodes, then okay, I'll take a break for a month or two, do whatever I have to do in life, and then come back to the content, kind of thing. Like, and throughout that time, people still be sending me stuff, that kind of thing, and I'll consume it when I need to consume it. But I've always made sure like to take regular breaks. Like even at the moment, I think my last episode was like just before Christmas, and we're now in February. I haven't done pretty much any content. Like I'll share stuff on my stories every now and then, but I haven't recorded anything. Like I've mainly because of like personal life circumstances, but also just because you just need a break from stuff sometimes. Like for black people, it's long talking about racism all the time. Like it's actually tiring. and I'm not even just talking about racism. Like I'm talking about gender discrimination, disabilities, like all those kind of things. Like so, it can be a lot, and it can be quite consuming for especially me as one person. So I'm more than happy to take a break whenever I need to. And the fact that I've put certain things out into the social media atmosphere, if you want to call it, it's there for people to consume whenever. Like this is not just a like one-time thing where if you don't watch it in February, then you're never going to be able to consume it. Like people can go to episode 1 of my podcast now, and the issues will still be relevant today. So it's not even a thing. It's fully timeless. So I'm not really in a rush in terms of like I have to really smash up this episode and that episode. Like it will happen, in God's time when I need to. But I'm not gonna let my own sort of mental suffer as a result from it. And maybe that's at the detriment of like not having the necessary growth that I need to, because people in this, I call it the microwave generation, like to consume stuff like really quickly, and you need to be putting out weekly content, blah blah blah. Like, cool if that's gonna be my detriment, but I'm not gonna let like that kind of focus like basically put a big block on my mental health and really put a strain on my mental health, because then it almost seems like a second job kind of thing where like I have a like core job, and this is like it's a side hustle, so like I need to just basically be able to balance the two. And with the seriousness of what I'm talking about, like if I was to focus on that stuff like 5, 6, 7 days a week, like I'd be that's why I envy someone like I mentioned, like Troy Townsend, who like literally works in this industry and pretty much consumes this stuff like every day. Like even he has to take breaks every now and then. Like he'll remove himself from social media, all that kind of stuff, because it's difficult for especially black people who are in this stuff and experiencing it every day.
Especially with the frustration of feeling like you're not being listened to by the people that can make change, and frustrated by the people that have the power to do something but aren't really on board like that, and you're just like knocking against a brick wall. That frustration.
Literally. And even with you as a creative, like do you go through similar, like I guess, mental strains or like breaks where you have to like, oh, no, I need to just leave this alone, like, and come back to it, and all that kind of stuff? Like I'm sure that happens to you, right?
Definitely, man. Definitely. I've had mad periods of breaks. I've had so much self-doubt. I've had like it's a lot to constantly put yourself out there. And it's funny because you've probably had this too. When you speak to your friends and they're like, "Rah, I see you're doing your thing. You're like, you're really on it," and then you're like, "Bruv, do you know how much I'm slacking?" In my head, I'm thinking, "Bruv, I'm slacking. What
Have you seen my to-do list? And you're telling me I'm doing a madness?" Nah, man.
It's crazy, but I guess that's perspective in it. But I think particularly for the subjects that you're covering on your podcast and your platform, makes 100% sense that you're taking regular breaks. Because if you have that in your mind 24/7, you're gonna start hating people. Like you're gonna literally start you're gonna be side-eyeing everyone, because you're gonna be like thinking about all the things that have happened and all the injustice, and you're just angry with the world, and sometimes it can be a lot to take.
But who knows? I might want to end up doing that full time. Like if obviously money was something that was able to like come alongside that, then it might be something where I could transition into it full time, and actually then that's another problem to be able to deal with that as a full time job at the moment. Like if I do get to that stage, then I'll have to be able to focus my psyche to be able to take the breaks when I need to. But like at the moment where it is purely a side hustle and like doing it on the side of like all of life's other challenges, then it's something that I'm like, no, I can't like suffer like that, because there's only one of me, you only have one life. Like if I end up taking my mental somewhere else for the reason of that, like it's a lot.
Yeah, man. And I guess when it's all like mental is the most important thing, because that dictates everything. So if that's not in shape, everything else is not important. Exactly. So no, completely understandable, man. Completely understandable. On a similar kind of vein, actually, essentially what like when I looked at what you were doing, I was thinking I reflected on my own feelings around football. Now I love football, like as you do as well. I love the game. Like I love the game.
Who you support again?
I support Arsenal. Well, I mean, I shouldn't say that so proudly, but are you good as well?
Yeah.
Come on, my God.
Come on. We can say that a bit more proud at the moment. Like, we're not.
Yeah, a little bit more, but those games in hand, we need to win a few for me to be like.
I don't like being games in hand FC, man. I like points on the board, but
trust me. But it's looking promising. Let's see if Arteta's got what it takes to do his thing. But yeah, man, I love football, and like a lot of the content I consume are like football podcasts. So
same.
Like Vibe with Five is one I listen to regular.
Facts.
Check in with Cheeky Sport every now and again. Filthy Fellas, obviously, them man.
Do you listen to Touchline Fracas?
Nah, I don't actually, but I've seen them about. I've seen them about. Yeah. So obviously, like, man's a big lover of football, innit? But I've been very avoidant of making content around football or talking about football or trying to be in that space, because frankly I actually think football social media is very, very fucking toxic. It's especially toxic, in this country. Football Twitter, football social media is fucking toxic. From the way I see it, it's toxic. So I've thought, you know what? I actually kind of want to avoid it, because I don't know if I'm actually mentally and emotionally ready to, start chatting on the regs about it because of how toxic it is. So obviously, bro, you're talking about some deeper topics, racism in football being the standout primary one. And obviously knowing how toxic football social media can be, like, the main reason that I've avoided it is because of like the backlash or potential other nastiness that could come your way. So I was actually curious to know if you have actually had any backlash or anything that was a bit untoward, and how you've navigated that because of how close to home this subject is.
Thankfully not a huge deal, because I think where maybe in the last couple of years we've been in an age where like people are taking racism and discrimination a bit more seriously. And let's look at the Euros, for example. Like, although what happened with the 3 black players was like such a horrific thing, but I guess the reaction to it was everyone was like, oh, this is wrong. They made all the posters around London, 3 lions, all of that stuff. Like, people, like, even if whether they're faking it or not, people like put on a bit of a like front to show that they care about, when someone is discriminated against, people do like have a bit of more of a reaction to it than to what it was maybe 5-10 years ago, where they would just maybe not even acknowledge it or maybe question if it was real or not. So like that side of things, if there's people like me like really championing it, then people could sort of latch onto what I'm kind of saying. So there's definitely more positives than negatives. The only negatives I have had is you just get the odd tweets here and there, like people being like, oh, like, is this really an issue? Or what about, white, like, if you're talking about white supremacy, then they'll be like, oh, no, but people can be racist to white people, and all these kind of just comments and stuff here and
slap
there.
Them. Listen, I'm saying it on record. Anyone that says that shit, I want to slap your face, bro. Trust me, I'm saying that on
it gets
record.
mad. Yeah, facts, bro. That's underline that because yeah, it's. But I look at it as that those are the exact people we're talking about on football social media. You haven't got a profile picture, like you've either got a footballer as your profile picture or just like a random thing as your profile picture. You're just hiding behind that kind of thing, like probably sitting in your bedroom, like just in the dark, like just writing these comments, like not being engaged with society kind of thing. So I just look at them. I even laughed. I laugh at those kind of people because I'm like, you're just not like you're not with it with society. So those are calm.
Yeah.
But I guess another example which people might not think of is like maybe people being like quite attached to their clubs, and so there's been times when I've like gone on social media and tried to call out clubs for like what they are and aren't doing, and maybe like tried to reach out to like let's say the fan support groups of like certain clubs and stuff, and like people will like start getting defensive and be like, no, but my club's doing this because of that, or my club's not doing this because of that. So people get like quite defensive of their actual club, and so sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong. Like there's been times when I've challenged a club about why they're not doing a certain thing, and then their fans will come back and give me like in their droves, like they'll give me the reasons why they're not doing certain things, and I'll look at it and I'll be like, actually, you know what? No, it's actually fair enough. Like you're like not doing this for like a certain reason because you want to do something else in an actual positive direction. But it's not until I've challenged that and put it into the atmosphere that people have even sort of given that reason, that sort of thing. But yeah, then there's other clubs there's other times that people are just defending their club blindly because it's their club and they don't want anyone talking bad on it. So.
Yeah, I see that a lot as well. Actually, when like a lot of people will say, for example, big club that is an example of this, Chelsea Football Club is known as a racist football club, and people from other clubs are like, yeah, Chelsea, you lot always come, and then I'm like, guys, racism is a societal issue. It's not. It's not I
Chelsea
picked this
issue,
club and then this club is racist, so that one isn't. Obviously, some clubs have, for example, Millwall. Yeah, you fuckers, like, yeah, you guys are racist. I'm full stopping on that one. Your club is full of it, but in general, it's a societal issue anyway, so it doesn't matter. And it's weird. I see that as well. People proper defending their clubs, and it's like, guys, you're missing the point. You're missing the point. It's not about that when we're talking about this. Like, we're talking about what are each club doing to, bring solutions to the table and actually take actions that improve the experience that the players, the fans, the staff have as black people in the game.
Yeah.
So
no, absolutely. Yeah. And just even on the Chelsea example, like there's two sides to it, because there's one side where I think in the last month or so, like Chelsea, it came out like Chelsea had a massive history of like abusing young black players, like sort of in the coaching academy, and I think black players came out and spoke against it, and I think I can't remember if they've got not paid off, but like basically the issue got settled like in the court of law, and people got punished accordingly basically. So let's say in the 90s or 80s, don't quote me on this, but it was a massive story that broke basically a month or two ago. Well, I say it's a massive story. It didn't really get brought out into the news that much.
I didn't hear about this, by the way.
For obvious reasons, basically. So, but basically, they got outed for the racial abuse of their own academy players, like for a number of years, and then it came out and it got settled in their according manner, basically. So there's that side where like they're revealing the ugly side of it, but then Chelsea are doing some positive things to eradicate racism in the current day, and even something as little as when the players started taking the knee. Like no one really in Chelsea like kind of booed it, where you'd expect like when they first started taking the knee, you expect Chelsea, they're racist, like they're all gonna boo it, but they had like a really positive reaction to that, and I've seen like a real uptake in like Chelsea fans like sort of calling out racism like where they wouldn't have before. Like I even know people who've done it in the Chelsea ground and stuff. So it's sort of like that you got to like see where the narrative is and see like how people are actually reacting to it, and that kind of proves where it's not like a Chelsea specific issue, as you said. It's a society issue where there's people from society are going into Chelsea, so you're going to have different reactions. And however, football is sort of like a microcosm of that. So where society is, football will just reflect that and mirror what society is showing us anyway, which proves the ups and the downs of what's actually going on.
Yeah, most definitely, man. Another thing I wanted to chat to you about actually is about the like high profile players that you've had on your platform actually. So you've had quite a lot of high profile ex Premier League players. So the likes of Anton Ferdinand, Vincent Pericard, Kevin Harper as well. And as an outsider, it would seem very difficult / impossible to get hold of these people, even to have access to them. So,
Yeah.
Stephen, what tricks are you using to get these ex Premier League stars on your platform, man? I'm
Bro.
curious to know.
Bro, it's a combination of luck and just sheer, literally just chancing your arm in certain instances. Like Vincent, for example, I was lucky enough to work with Vincent at BT. Like Vincent basically started a new career. He started a new career and started working at BT. So me and Vincent literally started working at BT at the same time. So literally, as soon as I clocked him in the workplace, then it was sort of a no-brainer to get him on the pod. But then Kevin Harper, like someone literally just tagged me in one of his LinkedIn posts because he was talking about he does a lot of like stuff with Scotland against modern slavery and then speaking out against racism and stuff. And he's always spoken about racism as sort of we went into depths on my podcast. And then I literally just shot him a LinkedIn message. Was like, yo, this is what I'm doing. This is my podcast. Do you want to come on and have a chat? He came on. And then what was the other one? Anton, I met him at an event. Again, just asked him, do you want to come on my podcast? This is what I'm doing. You've had your documentary, etc. Like, do you want to come and chat on it? Yeah, he put me in touch with his agent, and then just kind of went from there, really. So, what I guess the summary is like, people are just all human, and if I know these, I guess, quote unquote celebrities like have a lot on their plate, have a lot to kind of deal with, and you'd probably think you as a small creative, like people maybe feel imposter syndrome where they feel like they're not worth like the celebrity's time or whatever. Like, I've only got like 100 followers. Why is he going to come on my podcast, kind of thing? But obviously with the niche topic that I'm talking about and how I present myself face to face when I'm talking to people, like if people have that energy and feel the energy that I'm radiating and feel like they actually want to contribute to the thing that I'm bringing to the table, then why wouldn't they come on my podcast, and why wouldn't they come and chat to me about it and just sort of go from there, really? And that's kind of how I felt with Anton. Like, I felt like he felt the vibe that I was giving to him, and he liked the idea of the podcast. And obviously coupled with where they are in life as well, so I can see that Anton is doing a lot more promo and a lot more things in social media. So I was lucky enough to catch him ride that wave, which was you got to take opportunities in life, but equally
100%, bro.
If I was going with if I was coming with dead energy and just like it's just feeling like I didn't belong where I was, then maybe he would have been like, nah, this guy, like, I'm not really feeling him, and then he wouldn't have come on. So like you just gotta take those opportunities. Like, I don't necessarily have like mad contacts in the football world, like that kind of thing. Like, I'm just a regular football fan. Like I said, we're both Arsenal fans. Like I don't really have any. I'm just a casual football fan, but through different means and using your network and building up from there, kind of thing, then you start to grow and do this kind of thing. So there isn't really a magic recipe, I'd say.
Yeah, no, it's a good lesson for me personally to listen to, and also anyone else listening to the podcast. You just gotta, I guess, put yourself out there and have some conviction, because I guess with you being so committed to the mission of Beyond the Hashtag, your conviction probably came through when you asked those people to come on your platform, right? And then they buy into that. So that's I hear that. And
one thing I'd say as well, for and this is probably the same for everyone who's released anything creative that has like quote unquote blown or has like it looks like they're like, Rala, how did you do this? For everyone that does get into the limelight and does blow, there's like 100 either flops or failures or things that didn't happen. So for every Anton Ferdinand that came on my podcast, there's 10, 20, 30, 40 people who didn't reply to me or who I couldn't make it work with, or like people who I've just got on my list and like it just hasn't worked out for whatever way. So like that's the side of things as a creative you probably understand, is that people just don't see, like, and it is mad.
Fam, Thierry Henry, you need to reply to the email, fam. What you doing? What you doing, bro?
He's not even on social media no more, this guy, man.
Yeah, not emails, man. Emails. He needs to reply to the email. Listen, literally. Patrick Vieira, I want to see you chatting about your Premier League manager. Bro. You got bare weight. Come on,
bro. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's all of that. So I mean, it's literally just, and it's funny because there's people who if you meet them in person, for example, and they'll give you mad energy, and then you follow up on the email, whatever, and then it will just go silent. Whereas there's some people who you might meet in person and the energy is a bit like, but okay, let me persist with it, let me go through with it, and they'll be the ones who actually end up giving you the best content and you don't really expect it. So it's just it's just very, very interesting. Like, my eyes have been open to a lot.
Yeah, so I guess you just always got to put your hat in the ring and just or put your bets in and just hope that one of them's gonna come come through and you could have a big you could have a really good episode with them, really good moment, and that starts the beginning of a new relationship as well, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
100%.
so it's good. Yeah. I actually listened. I first listened to the Anton, for the podcast you did with Anton like Christmas time last year, because that period between Christmas and New
A
Year's
new
where
year.
you're just chilling, you're just chilling. So I listened to it then, and I was very it was a really good conversation, man. It was very eye opening. I
Yeah.
haven't watched his documentary yet, but some of the things Anton was talking about, obviously with the alleged case with John Terry, alleged, and then also the like the things that are followed on from that, how his
Yeah.
life has moved since that incident. And one of the things that really surprised me, bro, which I'm surprised I didn't clock, but when I was hearing about him, when Anton was so actually let me go back a bit. So to give
Yeah.
everyone context, basically in 2012, I believe, or 2011, 2011-12
2011,
season,
yeah. 2011, yeah.
the 2011-12 Premier League football season, Anton Ferdinand, who's a black football player, was allegedly, quote unquote, called a fucking black cunt by
Yeah.
John Terry, who at the time was the England football team captain.
Yeah.
And it sparked off this whole debate, and also this whole case where John Terry was going to court for racist abuse, and it sparked a lot of conversations and people calling for reprimands against John Terry, etc., etc. Anyway, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't have the exact facts here, but he was found guilty by the FA, but not by the court of law,
Not the
right?
court of law, correct, yeah.
Right. And after this incident, which also had video evidence, am I right in saying that as well?
That's how it
Video
broke in the
evidence?
first place. Yeah, it was all on social
Right.
media, yeah. Literally.
As a result of that, Anton was saying on your podcast that after the incident after that season, the 2011 season, after that incident happened, he only made 13 more Premier League appearances, and then was pretty much frozen out of the Premier League because none of the clubs wanted to go near him, which absolutely blew my mind. I was shocked, not necessarily surprised, but I was really shocked. I was like, I'm surprised that there was not more noise about the fact that a man's career was ruined after he was on the receiving end of racist abuse. It's absolutely insane. And all because he defended himself and made sure people knew about it and wanted to make sure it was addressed appropriately. He was frozen out, which really, I was really shocked by it. And it's the first time I've heard of it. And this is back in 2012. We're talking about 10 years ago. And it's the first time I'm hearing about it. So that was really shocking. So I'm curious, Stephen, if there are other stories in modern football that you've heard that have been away from the public eye, something similar to that with Anton Ferdinand, that has really driven home the message to you of the importance of your mission with Beyond the Hashtag, because I think some of these like stories that are being kept under the surface are it's really shocking that they are, but I'm curious to know if there's others that people should know about.
Yeah, I mean, I'd hope to bring a lot of them out in future episodes that I do with people anyway, to be honest. But like, there's the one I was referencing earlier, for example, where there's a lot of news that comes out where it comes out, it's in the public eye, but because I guess the media outlets don't really report racism unless it's like to the absolute highest end of celebrity players, they don't really like, they'll report it, they'll put out a little tweet, you'll get like 10 retweets, and then they'll say that I've done it, but really and truly no one's really looking at it. So a lot of this stuff, like, so I was referencing like the Chelsea scandal where like there was a load of players in the academy who were racially abused, and it's only now like they're speaking out, and the coaches are getting reprimanded for it. Like, there's stories like that pretty much you can find every week or every month, like if you sort of following the right pages, or like, if you go and Kick It Out, for example, or if you follow people like Troy Townsend, who I was referencing, like those kind of people who are in that kind of space talk about these things all the time, but they just, Sky Sports News will rather focus on Ronaldo scoring, a goal yesterday or the day before, because that's what people care about, and that's what's going to make headline news, kind of thing. So there's literally stories like that for days. Like, the Chelsea one I'll use as an example, but if you literally go on any proper like news outlet, or if you go on Kick It Out's news page, or just different sports news outlets, they'll reveal these stories, but it's just people are more concerned about the top corner goal from the weekend, or like the Champions League game coming up, whatever. Like, that's the media reflects what people ultimately care about in society. So if there was more demand for these stories to come out and be in the news regularly, then you would see it more often, and you would, those kind of things wouldn't be a surprise to you, because it'd just be in the public eye. So yeah, I mean, there's literally examples for days, and I'm sure more players will, seeing Anton and seeing people like that, will have the confidence to reveal those kind of stories and reveal the impact that racism kind of had on them. But it's just, it's mad. Oh, actually, speaking of Anton, I guess Rio Ferdinand, who, if listeners don't know, is his older brother, who's, I guess, more famous and more in the public eye than Anton. He was basically on par with John Terry. People say better than John Terry in terms of like a defender at the time.
Better, definitely better.
Yeah. So he basically, I can't remember if he either lost his place or like was due to be England captain, and basically people favour John Terry in the England team over himself, basically. So as a result of his brother being racially abused by his basically teammate, he also suffered as a result in terms of his England playing career. Like, after that, like, can you imagine? Like, he's basically one of the best defenders England's ever seen, and because his brother got racially abused, he is suffering playing wise as a result. Like, he didn't suffer too much for Man United, but like for England, his career definitely took a hit after that incident, which again is mad.
Yeah, actually, you're right. I do remember this, because he didn't get taken to one of the tournaments. Was it Euro?
Yeah, it might have been 20.
He didn't get.
It might have been 2012 actually. And people kind of cover it up and say because he's on his way out, kind of thing. But he was still good enough to be at those kind of tournaments. But yeah, after the Anton thing, it pretty much was like his England career was pretty much over as well.
People can't say it was or not. He was in a Man United team that lost the league with a last kick of the game from Sergio Aguero. He's not on the way out. He won the league the next season. Crazy. But his England career did get cut short. It did get cut short. Actually makes me wonder how they must feel about supporting England sometimes, because obviously it's like you got frozen out by these lot because your brother got racially abused. It must be a little bit of a cognitive dissonance thing. Like, you just have to forget that a little bit while supporting the country. But yeah, I guess what you're saying about the fact that there's a lot of incidents probably it's a mad one, because it's a sign and it shows how prevalent racism is within the game and society. But I guess because people don't want to, quote unquote, listen to stories about that, or I think, in my opinion, want to avoid those realities because they can't fathom that it's so ingrained in society. They don't push those messages, and it brings me on to something else that I wanted to get your perspective on, which is obviously a few years ago we had somebody in the game currently playing challenge the media about their racist agendas with the stories that they do report, because obviously, even though they're not bringing light to a lot of these racist incidents that are happening within the game, they're certainly bringing a tinge onto certain black young players in the game. And obviously, a few years ago, we had Raheem Sterling putting out a very thoughtful Instagram post which highlighted the nuances between how they report about white footballers versus black footballers. And obviously now, because you're on the ground and you're in that world of seeing how the institutes are responding to conversations about racism, how would you assess the media's response to it, and have you noticed any changes? Have you noticed any positive movements forward from the media in terms of how they're reporting on black players, or just racism in general, just from your perspective?
Yeah, again, there's two sides. There's a side where a lot of people get this reference, the Graham Souness Pogba side, where there's
fucking hell.
there's people in the media who just can't shake off their unconscious bias, or people even say their conscious bias towards young black footballers or young black rich and successful men doing well and probably doing better than they did in their careers. So they'll always find something to blame them with and a stick to beat them with, and the newspapers or media outlets will latch onto that and always put them in the public eye. Like if a black person, like a black successful footballer, does something wrong, it's, you know, the height of the media. And if a white footballer on the same level does something equally as wrong, it won't reach the heights or, you know, get the necessary coverage that it needs to. So there's still so much of that going on in the media itself. But then the only good side I've kind of seen to it is that, you know, there's more talk about getting more, you know, black and multicultural journalists in the media. Like there's those discussions. Like I've seen on the last few Black History months, like there's been, especially an institute like The Athletic, who are like quite a new and improved sort of media outlet. They have their faults as well, but like they're doing quite a lot to push the narrative of, you know, getting young black creatives and just young Asian creatives, etc., into the sort of media space, which is really, really good. And yeah, I guess as I mentioned earlier in the episode, stuff like when the Euros incidents happen, like, you know, there's a lot of media coverage and there's a lot of people, you know, promoting the anti-racism kind of agenda. And again, there's a lot of like hashtags and a lot of campaigns and stuff, which is good because it raises awareness. But again, that's where I'm coming in and I'm like, okay, that's cool for like a week or two, but like, what are you doing this time next year? What are you doing in 6 months' time, etc.? So they are doing a lot more, like, whereas before they might like brush it under the carpet or ignore it. Like they are acknowledging a lot more, but equally, someone like Sky, for example, I'm like, why is Graham Souness like still employed by you or not getting suspended for some of the things that he's saying? Because it's so blatant now. Like it's almost like you're slapping me in the face when like you're not doing anything about it, because it's like, what more evidence do you need from this guy? I think he's even had incidents where he's like, I think he spoke ill of like the Latin American culture. Like he said something directly sort of offensive towards the Latin American culture, and this was like found. He's basically found guilty for it. Sky acknowledged it. Sky apologized for it, but he didn't really get suspended or anything. He was just like sorry and then carried on. Whereas if it's the flip side and like a black pundit, say Michael Richards says something mad about you know, the white culture or something, you think he's coming to work like any? Nah, no way.
Bro, P45's on the desk. It won't even be on the desk. It would be posted at his door just when he's about to leave for the office. He sees the letter on the floor like, what? HMRC? What are them lot talking about?
Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just the double standards are mad. So.
Yeah, man. God, I remember early in the season when Pogba got, 4 assists on the first game of the season, and then Souness is just like, well, he should get 5. He's like, and then they pulled up the stats, and it's like nobody's ever got like more than 4 assists in a game, and it was just like, this guy clearly has an agenda, but it's not being addressed. Even
I was talking about Jack Grealish, aren't they, and his price tag. But every week Pogba's 90 million, but no one wants to say Jack Grealish is 100 million. No one wants to say Harry Maguire is 80 million. No one wants to say these things, but when it's Pogba, when it's Sterling, like people want to start talking about money.
I know. Even the whole thing about, is Sterling world class? Of course he scored over 100 Premier League goals. Banged Champions League goals.
And he's 26, bro.
Class. It's mad, bro. It's mad. Of course he's world class. He was England's best player in the Euros. Of course. Like, let's not even like, it's mad. And I know they talked about on the Vibe of 5 podcast recently where they said, why is Sterling not considered world class? And I mean, it's pretty obvious. I think it's two things. It's a bit nuanced because I think it's racism, but I also think it's because he called out the media for their racism, and so they would never want to crown him as a top player. And I think that's probably another like nuance point as to why he's not considered as such. So it's a mad one. I think I even saw something on Sky Sports recently, actually, another thing which I'm just like, how much change is there really? Because Zaha, I don't know if you watched the recent Palace game where they played Norwich, and I think they drew 1-1. And Zaha scored a banger. He scored a banger. But you know, he missed the penalty later on in the match. And I think he like slipped. Sky Sports put a a video on YouTube where they were like from zero to hero because he missed his penalty, and I was like, wait a minute, there's bare players that have missed
Missed crucial penalties.
after scoring in a match. Like it happens.
Bro.
Messi, Ronaldo, they've missed penalties in finals, like big finals. Like
Messi missed one yesterday.
He missed one in the champion. Yeah, he missed one yesterday against PSG, against Real Madrid.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's definitely like I think like you were saying, there's definitely more that can be done, and is it really seriously being taken? I guess that's definitely up for debate. I believe.
Literally. And one last thing I guess I'll say on the media is that AFCON is a perfect example of how like the media are basically treating this whole racism thing and how much they actually want to progress. Like Sky Sports and BBC to an extent, but especially Sky Sports coverage of AFCON was embarrassing basically. Like from start to finish, like you had this opportunity like to, cover a massive world tournament. Like Africa is the biggest continent in the world, by the way. Let's not get this twisted.
Yeah.
Size-wise, Africa is the biggest continent in the world. So it has, all these countries, like it's a festival of football, like it's on the same level as Copa America, the Euros, the Asian Cup. It's on the same level as all of these tournaments. You've got the rights to it. You're not giving any pundits like time to analyze any games. You're having one commentator on all of the games. All these young black creatives who are in the social media space, all you have to do is just give some of them like a little 15-20 minutes time, like pre-game, half-time and post-game, to just talk about something. And adding another commentator to your roster, like it could be anyone, like all these black footballers who have graced the Premier League. Like you have so many examples and chances to do something great with this thing, and you literally showed it no love whatsoever. BBC only, I think, at the semi-finals started getting pundits and second commentators and stuff to do stuff, and it's literally like that whole disrespect of AFCON, like even asking players if they wanted to join up, or if they are you going to join your country because like it's middle of the season. Like the whole disrespect from AFCON, especially from a media perspective, like just proved, because it's a predominantly black continent. Obviously there's North Africa, but there's predominantly black continent. It just showed the lack of regard and the lack of care that they have towards actually tackling this discrimination problem. Because obviously if they'd done that tournament properly, it would have like been a real flag in the sand kind of thing, to be like, this is something we're really taking seriously.
Definitely, man. And you know what I find really weird about the whole thing is the fact that AFCON's been around for time. And it's been played in January for time, like for time, bruv, for time.
Literally,
AFCON's been about. So I was like, why are they asking bare questions about it, and why are they getting onto people for joining their countries when this tournament has been around for years? Players have been going to represent their country. In fact, it's better now because there's actually a winter break in the Premier League season.
So it makes sense.
So like actually now is a much better time. Like AFCON actually doesn't disrupt as much as before because now we have a winter break. So it made me really a bit like, this is not good, man. Like the way they're talking about this. But you know what? I'm glad because I think it made a lot of people tune in more. Like a lot of people in our community tuned in and really got involved in the tournament as a way to like support it and give it more, give it the respect it deserves. And it was a great tournament. Like I thought it was sick. It was sick. It was sick. Yeah, I mean it's a shame because my country, Nigeria, didn't. I mean, you guys, Ghana.
I'm Ghana.
You lot went out. You lot went out in the group stage. Comoros.
Comoros. Yeah, bro.
Boy,
God, what's funny though,
Ghana, you know,
because you lot were talking smack on us, and then you went out the next round. So we're both sort of in the same boat. Even though like the World Cup qualifiers that are coming, I ain't confident for that at all.
Boy, I'm nervous because the thing is, just because it's Niger, Ghana, and we're playing each other twice, I'm nervous. I'm nervous.
Blood fire on the
nervous. One of us isn't going to be in the World Cup, you know.
Can you imagine?
Mad.
But it's at the other one's expense.
Yeah, that's the. Ugh. Anyway, we'll see how that one goes, bro. So one of the things that I remember from your convo with Anton, which I thought was a really interesting point, that he was talking about the England players and when they receive racism while they're playing, and he was talking about how a framework should be coming from the institutions to allow the players to leave the pitch if they do suffer that abuse, compared to
Yeah,
the players deciding, because then it opens the door for a player to be scapegoated and to receive abuse for
absolutely.
them making the decision. And I thought it was a really great point, because I'd never really thought of it that way. I'd always been
Same.
of the opinion that, oh yeah, the players can just decide to leave and that will be that. But
Yeah,
then when I think about the repercussions of that and what could come as a result of a player
yeah.
deciding, I was like, actually, yeah, that makes sense. And the fact that the institutions aren't making that, they're not taking that responsibility
Away
away
from the
from the
players.
players. What other things do you think that institutions can put in place to protect players, especially take away from the international context, but if we take it into clubs or
Clubs, yeah.
academies or other facets of the game, what do you think the institutions could be doing more of to protect the players?
Yeah, I think they just need to be the driving forces. So whether it's clubs themselves or whether it's like football associations, like they need to be the main ones like driving the action towards um, the sort of anti-discrimination fight in so many aspects, because players are literally just workers. Like the same way you and I will go to work, like it's, it's not in our hands to make company-wide decisions. Like if something happens to us, like we'll go to HR and then they'll deal with it as a company and that kind of thing. So
Mm,
why must then, like, if I got racially abused in my office, like I wouldn't, like, and I wanted to leave my office and go home, would I then go and tell all the black people in my office, oh, let's all go and walk out and leave? Like, it doesn't really
yeah,
translate just because
yeah,
it's football. Like
yeah,
that's their office. Like it doesn't really make sense. So
yeah,
but in like I guess the general 9 to 5 space, that you most likely have the backing of your organization behind you. I say that tongue in cheek because there's
ropey,
yeah,
definitely
it's
a ropey
ropey, but
one.
in theory, like you're supposed to have the backing of your organization behind you for those kind of things. So like, but when it comes to football, it's like they're all just left on their own to kind of make their decisions, kind of thing. So yeah, absolutely, it's those people higher up. Like that example, I think that Anton was referring to was when England went out to, I want to say Hungary. It's either Hungary or Bulgaria. No, Bulgaria.
Bulgaria, right?
When
Yeah,
they went out to
yeah.
Bulgaria, and yeah, they knew racial abuse was coming, and like it was still. First of all, they had like the bloody 3-strike penalty rule, which is like basically, giving racism like 3 chances to to be dealt with already. So you
Oh
want to talk about
God.
zero tolerance, but then you're having a 3-strike rule on racism.
Yeah.
Cool, but then it's like it still at that point was like, I think it was like Harry Kane's ultimate decision. If he wanted like all the players to kind of walk off, then he would go to Gareth, and Gareth would then go to blah blah blah. And like all that should be completely wiped out. There should be an FA official, like if it's England for example, England FA official talking to the referee, talking to or whoever the head of whoever he needs to, and being like, as soon as this happens once, yep, I'm taking all my players out of it. It takes everything away from their hands. So there should be that kind of representative, whether it's at a club level or international level, like a representative of that club talking. If it's a abuse on the pitch, then they deal with that. If it's social media, then again, they're the ones who speak out and deal with that. If the players want to also add their 2 pence because of their profile, etc., they can. But on all different levels, whether it's abuse on the pitch, social media, like unconscious bias, like if the media are you know portraying players in the incorrect way, like all those kind of things should be dealt with by the employer of that player, basically. Like, and I just feel like because it's football, and people see footballers as these celebrities and as their own kind of profile, they expect a level of action, kind of thing. But at the end of the day, they're going to work, they're in a job, they're in an institution. So why shouldn't that
Mm,
institution take more responsibility? And yeah, honestly, it's one of the things, and I didn't necessarily have this mindset before I started doing what I did, but speaking to people in the game, and they really make it like known, and they made me understand that like there's so many people who are just hiding behind all these like massive players, your Rashfords, your Sakas, your Sterlings, etc. They're just letting them take the flak for all these things, when really and truly
yeah,
they have the
man.
power to make these changes, but because they don't really want to, they're happy to give Sterling his little 5 minutes, or like give these little documentaries on these little hashtags, because it makes it seem as if they're doing stuff in the background, but really and truly
Yeah.
they're not addressing the problem. So I would like to see more, if there was more black players in the current sort of roster of players who could come out and actually challenge those institutions a bit more. I'm not saying they have to because they've got their own issues and stuff, but if there was more of that,
Yeah.
people would actually like understand that how much isn't being done that could be done.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think it probably comes from the fact that a lot of people who are running these institutions are people that don't really
Don't get it
know about racism. They've never really experienced it on a level.
at
They've never
all.
experienced it structurally.
Yeah.
They've never had to contend with it. So for them, it's hard for them, or it may be harder for them to take it as seriously. But that's not what is needed,
Yeah.
right? That's not what is needed to tackle these issues, and also just to make the players feel protected. Because you know what, I
Comfortable.
can't
Yeah.
lie. Like earlier in the pod, I was talking about the dream of being a professional footballer, fam.
Yeah.
Even though I was not good enough, like I'll
Yeah.
happily admit I wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
I'm almost glad that I wasn't, because when you
Look what you have
combine
to deal
social
with.
media
Yeah.
with all this, with being a footballer and the spotlight it gives you, bro, I definitely would have fucking been like, my mental health would have been in shards, bro.
Mm.
Because all it takes is for you to make a little mistake on a pitch, or for you to speak a bit more about something than you should,
Yeah.
or
You're
whatever it
finished.
is, and you're
Yeah.
getting destroyed in the
Yeah.
DMs, destroyed in your mentions, like, and the people that are supposedly there to help you aren't backing you. Like,
Yeah.
like, I do really feel for the black players in the game that are coming through right now, because it must be a lot to handle. So
Mm.
yeah, man, I definitely hope that we are on the way to maybe seeing some change. But I guess it's a slow burner. Or how are you seeing it?
Yeah, no, I think it definitely is a slow burn, and sometimes I've said the harsh reality to myself, like there's a large possibility and large reality that I won't see a lot of the change that I'm trying to promote with even in my lifetime, like, and that's not beyond the realms of possibility. Like, I don't expect racism in football, discrimination in football to make the massive change that I want between now and the next, like, I don't know, 80 years, however long I'm on this earth for. Like, I don't necessarily expect that, but I'm trying to do stuff for like the next generation to hopefully see a kind of impact. But it all just depends on how much people care to resolve this issue. It depends on, how white allies want to help us, fight this issue. Like all the white people that are captains in the Premier League, for example, like how much are they doing? Like, I know someone like Jordan Henderson is actually quite a good example of what you can do on that level and the kind of status it
Yeah.
has. But how much all the other white captains like doing stuff like that. I've heard stories of someone like Harry Kane refusing to take any questions about racism in an interview that he did with a journalist, like stuff like that. Like, yeah, little stuff like that, which is like, bro, you're the captain of Spurs, you're the captain of England, and you're not really trying to talk about racism. Do you know what I mean? Like all these kind of things. So, and going back to the institutions, what they can do. If you look at, I don't want to go too much into the Zouma stuff, but like what institutions did in terms of like pulling their sponsorships with West Ham. But I'm saying like that, we're not getting into the depths of their example, but like what they did in terms of like those sponsors pulling out of their deals with West Ham or their deals with Zouma, it shows that if you really want to, you can pull sponsorships and you can hurt people in their pockets. So if, an incident happens, why shouldn't a club say, okay, because of this direct incident with a player, like if for example Adidas was shown to have some kind of racial incident with like an Arsenal player, for example, and Arsenal like, you know what, we're going to do something as big as like, we're going to cancel our sponsorship, well, cancel our deal with Adidas because we're not happy with how you treated one of our players. And this is like Adidas who's like sponsoring all this new flash training gear that we're bringing out, all our shirts and everything. Imagine Arsenal were like, nah, because of racial abuse or because of discrimination, we are going to cancel this deal right here, right now, with immediate effect. Can you imagine like the scale of? But they're not going to do that because
that would be huge. That
it would be massive, wouldn't it?
Huge.
Do you know what I mean? And that's what in theory should happen, because that's what a zero tolerance approach to racism is. But they're not going to do that because they don't care enough to make it hurt like that. So or impose the necessary sanctions that it needs to. So that's the sort of level of action that the institutions need to be taking, but they'll just never ever do that. So we have to try and make the small incremental changes to see if we can hopefully make that institutional change and try and get more ethnic minorities in those kind of positions of power, so you can make the little policy changes and stuff like that, and then maybe eventually you'll see like a wide scale act such as that. But it's not beyond the realms of possibilities, because they can pull out of deals and sponsorships and hurt the pockets, but it's just a case of wanting to.
Yeah, it can be done. I mean, with the Arsenal example, like Stan Kroenke cares too much about money, so I don't think that's going to be happening. But listen, if Uncle Dangote was in in charge. Listen, that
Bring him,
sponsorship would
bring
have
him.
been pulled, fam. No more tracksuits. What are you talking about? It's like
None.
Bada
Retro gear,
in
none
the
of that, man.
yeah, man. Making sure we're winning on the pitch as
Facts,
well.
bro. Literally.
But yeah, actually, I shouldn't hate too much because we aren't doing too bad. We're doing better than we thought this season.
Yeah,
but,
yeah. I know,
no,
can't
the
complain
point
too much.
stands that the damage is you can do it. It's just, are you really on it? And actions speak louder than the words, man.
That's it.
Actions speak beyond the hashtag, innit? Come on.
Come on. Come on.
Yeah,
I like that. Oh, one more thing as well, bro. Social media
yeah.
as well, in terms of like actions not being done, like all this like ability to take away the comments or take away what people are posting, emojis, that kind of thing. That's another thing where, and I've spoken to people directly, that social media companies have the ability and the technology to remove certain things or to not make things like in the public eye, but they literally don't want to do it, and there needs to be more pressure put on them from institutions in the football game, like associations, that kind of thing, to be like, you know, why don't all the football clubs, they do this silly, oh, we're gonna black out for a weekend thing and then come back like 3 days later. BS. Like, if you really want to make a change, like, literally be like, Arsenal Football Club, we are not using Twitter anymore until they change blah blah blah. Like, that's what Thierry Henry did, and he's still out in the wilderness by himself, by the way. He's like the only one in the public eye, not on any social media anymore, because he took a stand and said, nah, social media are not doing enough. I'm not going to use you until I feel that you've made the necessary changes, and he's sticking to that. He's not on any socials and stuff. But then all these like clubs, this is why the whole beyond the hashtag thing comes in, because they'll do this Premier League blackout for a weekend, and then they're back on it a few days later. So all that happens is that like people just forget about Twitter for 3 days and come back to it. Like, what good is that doing?
Yeah, for real, man. For real. Imagine the impact it would have if all 20 Premier League clubs said, we ain't using Twitter until further notice.
That's exactly.
Further notice. Then Twitter's going to be like, okay, guy, the boardroom, the emails will be flying around about meetings. How are we going to get these Premier League clubs back? Because all their tweets bring all the football fans on, and the football fans see the ads and all that shit. So it can be done. It can be done. That's for sure, man. That's for sure. So obviously we're coming towards the end of the podcast, and
I know we talk forever, bro. Honestly,
there's a couple things that I still want to chat to you about, and you touched on it earlier. And it's to do with a man and a cat. A man and his cat. Mr. Kurt Zouma. It's been a hot topic recently, and just to give, if you haven't heard about this and you're listening to this podcast, you're definitely living under a rock, or just in a country that doesn't speak English. But it must be international news. It must be with
he's French as well. So I mean,
So if you don't know, there were videos that came out a week or two ago where Kurt Zouma was seen physically abusing his cat. And you know what I have to say? When I saw the video, I was like, "Rah, man, that's a bit mad. I can't back that. It's a bit mad." Like, my initial reaction was, "Ooh, he's going to get destroyed for this. He's going to get finished," and rightly so. You know, man's drop kicked his cat. So boy,
a defenseless animal, literally. Like,
boy, it's mad. It's mad. But I think the reason that it's become such a big topic is because people are talking about equity of punishment in this case, and obviously animal abuse is wrong, and it's not something that it's something that is abhorrent. Can't really be doing that. You know, full stop. And I think the issue that a lot of people have taken is its comparison to racist abuse. And, you know, when we're talking about how we as a society live, you know, you would like to think that actions against fellow humans is seen of as at least equal, if not more importance than animal abuse. But obviously we've got two high profile cases with Luis Suarez and the alleged John Terry incident. And John Terry actually found guilty by the FA. So in the football terms, he did dish out racist abuse. Those incidents not being dealt with the same levels of punishment. So I just wanted to understand, Stephen, for yourself, in the space that you're in, what were your general thoughts on that situation and the punishments / backlash or the lack of
Yeah.
dished out in comparison to racism that
Yeah.
has been seen by players, staff, over the years within the football world? What's your general take on those things?
Yeah, firstly, I'll admit I struggled to get a real grasp of what my opinion was on this for the first few days when it happened, because I was hearing so many different opinions from the black community saying one thing. I had essentially the white community or the pet lovers saying another thing. It was, and then I had people sort of giving arguments on both sides. So there was a lot of discourse going around, and I was literally right, what should the right thing that was supposed to be done, what should have been done basically. So I really struggled with this, and it took me a while to really sit down and think about it. Obviously the first thing was that the animal abuse being wrong, and he should have got some kind of punishment for what he did. That goes without saying. What he did was barbaric, and it was stupid. There's so many things that were wrong with it. So I think, but taking all that into consideration, I think the kind of place I'm with it at the moment is that the two, racism and animal abuse, are two separate issues. So people are not comparing them for the sake of comparing them. They're not just seeing two incidents and being
that's actually a very important point to add.
They are completely separate issues. So no one's saying, no one would have looked at the two incidents being Zouma's kicking a cat and someone is shouting a racial slur at someone. No one's comparing them because they're two forms of abuse. That's not why they're comparing them. They're comparing the after effects of and the reaction to it more than the actual abuse things themselves. So they should technically be treated differently and be seen differently in terms of what their punishment should be. But the reason for people feeling outraged, and I'll call a spade, black people feel like they are valued less than animals in society, and especially in the Western world, where there's a lot more animal lovers than there probably is in anywhere in the world. Black people, and this is I want to say it's fact, because it's definitely the large majority of black people feel valued less than animals in society. So that's why there was a lot of outrage from the black community to be basically, look, you're pulling sponsorships from Zouma, you're calling for him to be sacked, all these kind of things. But if someone's racist to a black person, you kind of skirt around the punishments, you maybe give them little itty bitty fines or whatever. You say, you can forgive them, blah blah blah, and it's kind of what's the difference here, kind of thing. And then you've got ex-footballers like this Chris Kirkland guy who's coming out, and he actually, if you want to talk about comparing. Bro, if you want to talk about comparing, I just said about black people comparing the two. If anything, he's ignited the flame of comparing, because he came out on BBC Breakfast and made the direct comparison to say, racism got, 10, 12 games banned. He said factually, and this literally came out of his mouth, animal cruelty is worse than racism. He literally said that, word for word, bar for bar. Tried to come out and defend it afterwards, whatever. No, but you said what you said. You said what you were thinking. So, if anything, he's actually igniting the flame to say that it is worse and spark that kind of discussion to think. I still think it's two separate issues. So whether one's worse than the other, I personally value human life more than animal life. It doesn't mean I don't value animal life, but I value my own species more than the animal species. Do you know what I mean?
Keep it 100, man. Keep it 100.
Literally,
keep it 100. Yeah.
Someone made the example that it's people buy and trade animals in terms of eating them, or buying pets and whatever, that kind of thing. People don't buy and trade people because that's slavery. You don't do that. So there's a level of human life being valued more than animal life. It doesn't mean we should disregard animals, because we obviously love and value animals, but there's a reason why humans are put above animals in the grand scheme of things. So if you want to compare it that is the actual comparison. But anyway, so it's more, ultimately it came down to the reaction of, look, you can do all these things to Zouma, you can campaign for all these things, but when it comes to something like racism and the actual extent of what racism actually is, because there's people who are basically describing racism as just saying a few words to someone, basically, and that proves people don't actually understand what racism is and the institutional impact that racism has on people. But even the abuse impact of physical words or physical abuse, that kind of thing, people are basically saying that they don't understand it, and they value it a lot less than what the cat incident was, basically, and that's for people who suffer from racism, on whether it's a short-term basis in terms of the abuse, or whether it's the long-term whole life impact of it. They're saying like, look, like, we've been the victims for how long, and you guys have proved that you can do certain things to try and eradicate this, and you're not doing it. So like, where are we going wrong here? Like, why are you picking one punishment over another one? Like, if you want to set the standard for Zouma, if you think that Zouma should be sacked for what he did, then why don't you feel like everyone who commits racism and abuse should be also sacked for the same thing? Like, you have to put the two on the same level. If you think that Zouma should have got a 10-game, 2-game fine, whatever, then maybe you put racism on that same level and you keep it on 100 with everything. Like, but it's that disparity that isn't really making sense.
Yeah, man, it's a lack of equity in the level of punishment, isn't it? It's like, okay, if we're punishing Zuma, fair enough, he deserves to be punished. But if we're punishing him more than what these other people have done, you're essentially implying that the animal abuse is worse than racism, and that's a very slippery slope to start going on. Or it makes us feel like, well, obviously you clearly value animals more than you value humans of a different race to white in this country. And that's what you're implying. So I guess it sparks the conversation. Are you ready? Are you back in that opinion? And if you are, then let's go.
Prove it.
Let's go then. Let's go. If you think that that's not the case, then back it up with the actions, because they're the most important things. They're the telling signs. So yeah, man.
And I think it's shown that it isn't like as clear as Zuma should be sacked, etc. Because you've got his own manager, and maybe people say he has his own reasons, but his own manager basically saying that he's been fined by the club, etc. whatever, and he's going to be in contact with the RSPCA. He's had the cats taken away from him and going to go on training courses, etc. And basically saying that he deserves a level of forgiveness in society, and that's coming from a white man who's quite senior in age, etc. I'm not saying he's the mouthpiece for all white people and for he's setting the standard, but that's his view on things. So and it looks like the football authorities are pretty much backing what he's saying, because they haven't done anything differently against Zuma. So if they're setting that as a standard, then that's the standard. Like, whether it's right or wrong, that's the standard that they're kind of setting. So everything else should kind of fall in line with that kind of thing, and it shouldn't be a completely sack and go thing. It should be, okay, you're punished, but then you have an opportunity to kind of learn from your actions and to come back with it. Like, whether that's right or wrong, but that's the standard that they are setting. Some people will say that's not good enough, he should be sacked, but then I would challenge those people and say, okay, if you think you should be sacked, like I said, then everyone else should be sacked. Like, if someone's beating their partner, sacked. Like, if someone, like, it's the same. Like, do you know what I mean?
You got to keep it 100 with everything, fam. Everything. If we're opening that door, then let's keep it 100 with it. Yeah. No, I agree, man. I agree. Shout out to the cats. I hope they're recovering. Hope they're in a nice home. The owners stroking them up.
That killed me. People were like,
love and that.
the cats were in like a mansion the other day, and now they're being like taken to an animal home. Like, Twitter, when things like that happen, Twitter is just so funny. Like,
bro. As toxic as it can be sometimes, it can bring out bad, like, very funny shit.
Bro, when the world is in like its worst state, Twitter will just make the funniest jokes. Like, we thought World War III was going to happen a couple of years ago, and people were banging the funniest jokes. Can you imagine?
In it, I've even been seeing bare jokes about Putin when he was talking about pressing the button the other day. Bro, I was like, "Rah, okay, man's talking."
We could be gone like this, but people
bro, everything gone. I was explaining this to my girlfriend the other day. I was like, Putin was, because I think she missed the hyper, and I was like, yeah, Putin basically threatened humanity. He was like, "Yo, I'm ready to press this button and end everything right now." So, but I've been seeing bare jokes about it, like, yeah, Putin's cold, he's honest, like, he's a ride or die, or all that. And I'm like, yo, he's talking about extinction of humanity here.
Oh, bro, no, Twitter's a funny place. Yeah. I'll never forget World War III. That period, like, that few days on Twitter was probably the funniest few days. I just couldn't stop looking at my phone, like, just all the World War III tweets. Like, it must have been like just before the pandemic. It was killing me.
Yeah. I remember that, man. So yeah, just I guess my final question for you, Stephen, because you've been talking about the mission that you have with Beyond the Hashtag, and even talking about what the fact that you believe that what you want to see in the Western world in terms of equality of for all races and for all people who have been given a disadvantage socially.
Yeah.
How in your eyes would you measure a successful campaign to bring race equality into the game? Like, how would
Yeah.
you measure it? What would your yardstick be? How would
Yeah.
things look in Stephen's ideal world?
How long's a piece of string? It's difficult because I guess there's so many different categories to kind of break it down into. So and this goes not just again for racial equality, but for gender equality. You know, people with disabilities having better rights in the game. You know, lack of home, like equal rights for for LGBTQ community. Like there's so many different areas of football that need to be improved. But I guess there's certain statistics that you really want to see either eradicated or kind of brought to the better standards. So, for example, the amount of ethnic minority people in like the higher powers of the game. So in like the FA spaces and those kind of things, like those numbers are very very low and like really need to be like upped and changed and be brought to a proportionate standard to kind of fit the way society looks away from football as well. So not having an FA board that's made up of basically people who are white, male, and in their middle ages, that kind of thing. Having more, black coaches or Asian coaches in the game, even Asians in general in football, in British football.
Yeah, there's not as many.
Not just players, coaches, executives, all them like they. Considering the amount of Asians that love football and that play football, like I went to school with so many of them, and you're like, how none of you like made it into an academy, into the professional game? Like it's mad.
Crazy.
So it's just like looking at all those different categories, the bringing social media abuse down, like those kind of things. Like you can just pick a category and then you can look at the statistics and then just make little incremental improvements in that particular category. And having that, I guess I would have like the widespread outlook on everything and just be like, hey, if there's a little 5% here, there's a little 10% here, that you can start to see the little differences being made. And that's, I guess, how I'd measure it. Like, as I mentioned before, I don't expect everything to reach 100% the level that I want it to, even in my lifetime. But if you can start to see the little changes in attitude, the little, decreases in racial abuse, statistics, that kind of thing, like you can start to measure, numerically, like the difference that people are making, especially institutionally with the problem. And then socially, it kind of comes down to a bit of a mindset thing. Are more people talking about it? Or, if someone shouts racial abuse in the crowd, like, is the rest of the crowd like jumping on them basically to be like, why are you doing this? That kind of thing. So behavioural changes, like, are we seeing more of that kind of thing? Which we're far from doing that. If someone shouts racial abuse in the crowd, like everyone will probably just look at them. Maybe a couple of black people will get like a bit annoyed or whatever, but they might not feel the confidence to attack them because they're not going to get backed basically. So there's all these little things whereas if it was like if the same thing happened but like a Tottenham fan stood in the Arsenal end and started chanting against Arsenal, obviously he's getting jumped on, he's getting rushed,
getting banged.
Do you know what I mean? But like, if it's a racial abuse thing, then people are all of a sudden a little bit like touchy. So like, little stuff like that, which would be the utopian society that you'd like to see, is I guess the goal that you want to kind of aim to. So it's just a case of like picking an area and trying to see the little solutions being implemented and the little changes being made bit by bit. But again, for my message, if I can change one person's mentality, or if I can help to improve the statistics in one kind of area, then I would have gone some way to kind of achieving the goals that I want.
Yeah, no, it's a fair point, and I think it's because it's such a big shift that needs to happen. Like seeing those little implementations is a good way to measure the effectiveness, because like you said, a world where everything is equal is utopian, and it's impossible to achieve, I guess, because we as humans like to find like ways to differentiate ourselves. But I think with what you're doing, it's definitely an engine moving in that direction of correcting things. And I personally think I think things are, just for us as a race in this country specifically, I think things are slightly improving. Like, I definitely think things are better than when I was younger. Like, we're seeing more of our people on TV. We're seeing more of our people like doing big things. Like, I see people like young Philly Chunks becoming superstars, and I'm like, yo,
Yeah.
that wasn't happening
Mad.
when
Yeah.
I was a youth. That was not happening.
Yeah.
And so there definitely has been some level of change, but obviously, like you've been saying, and as has been seen by some of the things that we've talked about on the podcast today, there's still a long way to go.
Big time.
So Stephen, I wish you all the best with the
Bro,
fight.
thank
Obviously, where I can, I'm gonna help, but you're really doing your thing. So
I appreciate it,
salute
bro.
to you, man. Salute to you, man. Really, really, bro.
I appreciate you, bro. Thank you for having me on as well, and thank you for everything you're doing, bringing out the creative side of people and just letting people tell their story. Like honestly, bro, it's like your movement as well is very very powerful, and yeah, just I hope to see the Garden of Edun flourishing as we picture that picture that image, to kind of get to. So now big up your team as well, bro.
Nah, thank you very much, man. Thank you very much. For people that want to follow your journey after having listened to this podcast, and being like, yo, Steven's got sauce, you know? Let me go check in. Let me go check in on his what man's doing. Where can they find you, bro?
Yeah, so the podcasts themselves are on YouTube and all the audio podcast platforms. So YouTube, just type beyond the hashtag podcast. Similarly on Spotify, Apple Music, all those kind of things beyond the hashtag podcast. In the podcast section, if you just type beyond the hashtag, it will come up. Twitter at beyond hashtag, so not beyond the hashtag, at beyond hashtag, just 2 words. Instagram, same beyond hashtag, but with an underscore. Those are the two main platforms. We're even on like LinkedIn, all those kind of things. Just search beyond the hashtag.
Sick.
It'll come. Literally on LinkedIn, all of that, like Facebook as well, whatever social media platforms you use. Trying to build up the TikTok this year. That's like one of my 2022 goals. So TikTok is a whole nother.
It's the platform, you know.
Bro, it's mad. So,
now.
If I start doing movements on TikTok, then I'll put it on my other platforms, and then you guys will see that. But yeah, the main ones: Instagram, Twitter, and obviously YouTube and Spotify, etc. That's where you can catch me. My personal pages will be on there as well. I'm pretty much Stevie Adu on everything. So if you want to follow my personal page, then give me a shout on there. But yeah, those are the places to find me and find BTH.
Sweet, man. Stephen, thanks very much for jumping on the podcast. For everyone else listening, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you got some value. I hope this even promotes some discussion amongst, your friends, maybe family, colleagues, or even just within your own mind, just reflecting on what you feel about racism in football and what you're doing to tackle it if it's something you feel is important. So,
Thank you, bro.
Hope you all enjoyed listening, and I will catch you all on the next episode.
Peace. Love.